So welcome everyone. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our Fahrenheit 2024 Artist Panel with Peter Olson and Adam Chau. I'm Pam Aliaga, the Exhibition Manager here at the American Museum of Ceramic Art in Southern California, and AMOCA champions the art, history, creation, technology of ceramics through exhibitions, collections, outreach, and studio programming. This event will be recorded, so if you're a bit camera shy, feel free to turn off your video and politely stay muted until the end of the talk. Towards the end of our talk, we will have a brief Q&A portion for anyone with questions for Peter Olson and Adam Chau. Before I introduce these wonderful artists that we have here today, let me tell you a little more about Fahrenheit 2024, just to get you guys to convince those who are local to come visit us here at AMOCA and see the exhibition in person. But if not, we'll have plenty of imagery today. Now, this exhibition presents 100 pieces selected by guest juror Kathy King. We received more than 500 submissions from contemporary artists across the United States in response to our open call. The selected pieces range from traditional vessel forms to experimental creations to larger scale installations. We're excited to share the diversity of ideas, influence, and craft presented in this exhibition. Now, I'm happy to introduce our two presenting artists. Let me start off with Adam Chau. Adam is an artist living in Connecticut and New York, a graduate of the School of Art Institute's Designed Objects program. His research delves into the hybrid of a traditional studio ceramics and digital manufacturing. Chau produces blue and white porcelain objects using cobalt as a pigment, drawing parallels to both historic crafts and as well as material used in the tech industry. As an Asian American, he hopes to continue the lineage of blue and white by infusing a digital perspective on such a culturally respected medium. In 2018, he was awarded the NCECA Emerging Artist Fellowship, and in 2019 became a member of the International Academy of Ceramics. He is the exhibitions manager of New York State's largest independent arts council, ArtsWestchester, and currently the director of exhibitions for NCECA. Now, amazing. I'll pass it off to Adam from here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for that introduction. Can I just have a thumbs up if we can see this and we can hear me? Okay, great. Again, my name is Adam Chau, and the piece that is in the exhibition now is actually a fairly new series. So I thought I would talk about how I got there, because my previous work has also dealt with technology. So I think it would be great just to contextualize what is there in the new series. I have a BFA from Maine College of Art, which I would say is a traditional craft school. So I have a deep-rooted education in handicraft, in kind of low-tech crafts. I did a post-baccalaureate at Michigan State University, also in ceramics. However, when it was time to go to grad school, I really wanted to think about multiples and more of a global conversation in ceramics. So I decided to pursue industrial design. The department itself was called Designed Objects because it really tried to fuse industrial design with more of a independent way of making. So when I was in grad school for industrial design, we learned about something called tolerance, which is essentially how each object in mass production differs from itself. So what is the acceptable variation between one object and another? And I actually became extremely disillusioned um, with the production methods and in tight tolerances and how everything needed to be quote unquote perfect. So I decided to really investigate how ceramics can alter that thinking. And I created this 2x2 axis. It's actually pretty simple. On the x-axis, there's the manufactured, and up top and the bottom is the handmade. And on the y-axis, on the left, there's the digital, which is something that needs computation to complete, to start, stop, and finish. It needs to go through a translation process versus analog on the right side, which is something that has a mechanical translation. So I'm just going to quickly walk through each of those quadrants because this is a chronology of of ceramics. We can start in the lower right-hand side, which is where the hand meets the analog. It's something that's like a pinch pot, something that's using your hand, and it's an analog method to create something. Then we go up to the manufactured in the analog on the top right, which is essentially where we start to see the Industrial Revolution using molds, jigger jollies, even slip casting. It's still using analog techniques. However, it's starting to use stencils and really trying to standardize things to make multiples. And then we have the digital revolution where we have 3D printing start to become more widely available. We can 3D print in ceramics now. We can CNC ceramics and even laser. I wouldn't say laser cut. We can etch into ceramics using laser cutters. But while I was making this map about 10 years ago, I noticed the bottom left-hand quadrant was like super awkward. Like what could possibly be digital and handmade at the same time? So I really have spent the last 10 years exploring how traditional craft and digital craft can be combined together within ceramics. I'm not going to go over my main body of work previous to the artificial intelligence work that I'm making now, which used a CNC machine. I'm not going to cover that. It would take too long. However, I do blend both digital manufacturing techniques with hand techniques as well as digital culture. I also use language a lot. So texting, for example, I think is really important to millennials. And using language within the internet context is just everyone uses it now, but millennials in particular were on that cusp of having it bloom during the time that we were all like going to college. I got my first cell phone uh, when I went to college in Maine. And at the time when I got for my first cell phone, people were telling me that you shouldn't be on it too much and that you would become addicted, which, I guess we are. However, I also in the back of my head always thought that writing a text message to someone could be so powerful and evocative. And I really think that the text message is the 21st century love letter. Like it can really instantly communicate with someone. And I make these cell phones using technology like the hands here. The abstracted hands are used with a CNC machine and a brush, and the texts on them are actually real text messages that I sent to my now husband while I was courting him. We had a long distance relationship, and I would not be married without the internet. He's from Holland, and we had a 3,000 mile distance relationship for many years. So I use text a lot, both literally and a little bit more abstractly. I'm interested in how things like search engines can generate different results even with the same word. So I do Google search images on porcelain cell phones. The one on the right is a series that I call Dragon, where I typed in dragon into Google and I saw all the research. So Dragon Man, Dragonfly, Dragon Fruit, um, all these types of dragons. And I did the same with the word heart and got all these different results. I should mention these are all hand painted, which I took an extremely long time to do, which I don't enjoy. Hence the artificial intelligence, which is coming in the second half of this presentation. I'm also interested in visual vocabularies, so emojis as language as well. The platter on the left is an heirloom platter that's about, I would say, 4 or 5 generations passed down in my family, given during weddings. So I was the lucky recipient of this platter on the left, which I love because it's sentimental. However, to be honest, the aesthetic I'm not super into. It's a bit old fashioned, and I just started thinking, what would a modern day millennial heirloom look like? So the piece on the right, I made out of porcelain, and I translated every object into an emoji. So all of these blue symbols you can see on an Apple iPhone. Um, the emojis being used, I just translated it. And what I love about this is that they look kind of floating. And when I look at a phone, I feel like there isn't a horizon line. Everything's just floating around. So this is how I view this whole section. I'm really trying to convey that language is important to how I work, and that the new frontier of artificial intelligence, even though I'm outputting an image, actually really requires language as its main form of generating images. So I use a program called Midjourney, which is a software bot on a program called Discord. And it's where you put in a prompt, and you can see in red, I put in a blue illustration of a plate with two gay men kissing, Chinese, in the style of blue and white Ming Dynasty porcelain. So if I put that in, I'll get a result of four images, which is at the top half of this slide. And I get to choose, they're slightly different. Each one of those four, I can choose one of them, and it will kind of have a better resolution image come up. And that's the image at the bottom half. And then I can start to select and manipulate it into um, things like if I want, say, different types of clothing, or maybe it has six hands or eight fingers, I can manipulate that as well, although I try not to. That's just to say that past the prompting, there is manipulation that goes on after the AI kind of does its main thing. So I generate images that are inspired by Ming Dynasty blue and white wear. And I will say they are all different aesthetics. So some of them can be a little bit more photorealistic, some of them are a little bit more painterly. And I'll also add that if I put this same prompt, which I made a couple of months ago, in today, I would get completely different results. So if I put the exact same language in, it would generate something completely different, which I'm very interested in how it's thinking, how it's resolving these images, which essentially are collages. This is a collage system. It's taking from an extremely large data set of hundreds of thousands of images that are captioned and seamlessly collaging it together. So this is the plate that's in the exhibition at AMOCA. And it is what I love about it is you're seeing an image in 2 dimensions right now, but it is a 3 dimensional piece, but it originally came from a 2 dimensional platform. So I love that play from the digital to reality back to digital, which you're seeing it right now. I use porcelain blank, so I don't make my plates anymore. And I do that as an homage to Howard Cotler, who was prolific in his decal series. And Amoka has an amazing collection of Howard Cotler plates that I really hope everyone has the chance to see at one time. And Howard Cotler was making collages out of ready-made decals that he put on mass-produced plates. And in the 60s, he used a lot of queer-coded images and playing with gender. And I see my work as an evolution and a legacy from his work. So I don't shy away from that, and I don't pretend to have invented like homoerotic porcelain plates like this. But I do think the introduction of artificial intelligence is a new step. While Howard was using an X-Acto knife and ready-made decals, I am using a program to make a more seamless collage. This is another one of his plates. This plate it spells out a rose is a rose is a rose, which is again playing with language and also an homage to Gertrude Stein's poems. So I love that it is kind of a legacy that's going on with language and art and culture. Here's some kind of four initial plates that I've done, and I'll also mention they're 8 inches in diameter, and they're decaled. They are decals. So in this one, you can see that the figure on the right is embracing the figure on the left, but there are a couple of extra fingers on it. And I like having little Easter eggs, little hints that this isn't reality, not necessarily reality, and that I don't want to fool people wholly. I think I want to have people come upon my work and really imagine and wonder, oh, where did this come from? But then seeing that it has 6 fingers kind of tips you off to that it's a fake image. I also like the idea of what is real and what is fake, because the artificial intelligence is pulling from real images. It's not making this up on its own. It can't draw something originally. It's taking from other images. In a way, it is real because it's collaging it together, but it's a completely false narrative. So I like that interplay as well. I also really enjoy having these in both groups because, as you can see, again, I'm talking about the photo quality or the quality of aesthetics. Some of them could be more more like a photograph. Some of them are more graphic. Some of them are completely cartoony. And I like having that mix because I feel like all these are like little stories and it's multifaceted where you can really imagine, oh, what are these two lovers actually doing? What is this celebrating? And that it isn't just a singular story. It's a story of what if homosexuality was accepted throughout time, and what are these different stories that have been hidden from mainstream culture? And I usually like to end on something called the Gartner hype cycle, which is about how new technologies are accepted into mainstream culture. And this can be applied to anything outside of art, inside of art. And usually it starts with a technology trigger, which is a new type of technology. And all of a sudden, everyone thinks it's going to solve the world's problems, and everyone gets really excited about it. But then what ends up happening inevitably is that people get extremely fearful, and there's usually a subgroup that says, "Hey, hey, hey, we should be really mindful and go back to our former ways before this technology was ever invented," and that's called the trough of disillusionment, where it's a pendulum that swings completely the other way. But in time, that we've seen over and over again, we go through a plateau of productivity where these applications find their real place in the world. And this can be seen throughout ceramic history. When I was doing research in school, I found an article in Ceramics Monthly from the 70s about, I believe it was programmable kilns, and how that might be really taking away the knowledge of how to fire a kiln manually. So I think everyone gets fearful they get excited and then fearful with new things that come. I would say I am a technophile. I love technology and seeing where it goes and where it can help places, but it's also part of a toolkit. I still have a wheel. I still have a slab roller. It's part of my toolbox, and I don't just jump ship to a new technology. I just incorporate it. So I look forward to hearing any questions that you all might have, and then having a conversation with Peter. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Adam. I really like that slope. Wonderful. So let me introduce Peter Olson, who will be our next speaker. Peter Olson is an artist living and working outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His work comes from a rich tradition of photographers, having studied at the University of the Arts. Olson stitches collages in his own photography by creating a kaleidoscope layers of dimensional applications in his images and more recent works. Portraits of angry strangers, as he calls his street photography, are spliced with religious iconography of the Western art history, more than three-dimensional and circular loops created by the image repetition around cylinder vessels echo not only the wheel-throwing process, but also the deep attachment to the history of film photography. His work is in permanent collections of the Asheville Museum of Art, Scripps College, Crocker Museum, O'Keefe Museum of Art, Fuller Craft Museum, New Mexico Museum of Art, and of course, our collection here at MECA. Amazing. So I will hand it over to you, Peter, and let me just pull up.
Well, I can start with saying I've been a photographer for the last 40 years. I just recently stopped doing commercial photography. I never worked locally, so I got to travel a lot. I was very fortunate with that. But I had to photograph mostly executives, on a farm with people, and I had to make them look, handsome, young, honest, friendly, approachable, thin, perfect hair. And doing that wears on you. And so I would always find a day before the shoot or after the shoot to go do some street photography, where I could shoot people in my terms. And that's where the ceramics, my photography and ceramics, that's come from. Me shooting for myself. Yeah, so this was called not wallflowers. The center image, let's bring that up, the second one, the second slide. So this was shot in Times Square, which is probably, for me, the best place in the world to shoot. There's a ton of people. People are dressed fairly normal. They're not in business attire. People are somewhat guarded. And I can come away with 2,000 plus images in one session. And I'll just shoot. I'll just walk through the square, shooting nonstop for three hours, maybe 4 hours. And I take the bulk of the pictures back. And let's go to the next slide, if you would. I just want to show you that on these pieces. So in these pieces, all the people, again, either the bottom row, the individuals, they're all shot in the street. The background, which we'll show in a few minutes, designs, patterns are all from things I've shot in museums. They could be ancient books, sometimes medical books, very old ones I found. Would you go to the next slide? So this is one of the, another type of shooting on Times Square. Or it could be the Bean in Chicago, Camden Yards in London. Is you just confront people. I just go through the crowds and I shoot. Nothing sort of gets in my way. I'm polite, but I'm definitely getting what I want. I usually have somebody with me watching my back because it can get a little hairy at times. But I'm getting people in their natural state. They're not the normal executives I'm used to shooting. So I bring all that back to the studio and I go through the images and I come up with a group I want to work with. And I put that aside, and then I will go and throw pots I think these things would work on. And I'll probably do about 10 plus pots per session, glaze them, usually white glaze, lately black interiors, which stems from some of the pandemic pieces I did. Before the pandemic, I used to do decals on the inside of the pots as well. So they're completely, everything was image. When the pandemic came, everything changed and everything became black. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. So when I throw the pots, we glaze them, they come out of the firing. I then do an edit of the 10 pots, edit it down to 5, and I bring them in. I start working on them. I do some sketching on the pots, and then I'll do my anchor images, which is I just saw the second slide, which was the four people together. I work with that, and then I go to the next slide. So with this, again, it's the same thing. So where I'm getting my patterns from, this was shot in the High Museum, a show on Persian art. So again, when I'm traveling, if I'm not shooting, I'll go to museums. I've always got my camera, and I shoot almost everything I see. And you could go to the next slide if you would. So you take, and that was the pattern from the pants. So I come up with these wallpaper patterns to use as backdrops, and then go to the next one. So I'm speeding through this, but this is a sample of a garniture of this series. I think the final series had 10 pieces. The center one is the one in the show. All the people, again, were all shot in various cities. And I decided here just to make people uniform by taking all their clothes away and doing patterns. And every series turns into the next series I'm working on. If you go to the next one. So this was a panel I did, about 5 feet by 5 feet. And this came while I was doing the pots. And I decided to try something different. I have a slab roller. I tried to make, different shapes and using imagery and heavily textured. Before this series, my pots had a lot of white space on them, and I decided in this group there would be no white space. Everything would be covered. And in doing this series, I did a photo session of this person, Hirsch is his name, and he was tattooed head to toe. So I threw him in the group, and it worked really well. And this was at the end of the Not Wallflower series. And what this grew into is a new group of work, which I called Marked for Life, where I photographed people in the studio. So instead of doing street stuff, I brought people in to my studio and we did portraits. And if you go to the next slide, this was that series. So there were individual people. They happened to be tattooed, but it wasn't about that. It was about them. And so we did, again, I thought were really wonderful, honest portraits. They participated in them. They saw all the images on the computer, made suggestions. Some I listened to, some I didn't. And it started the series. And you'll notice there's more white space. There's still patterns. But this was the final evolution of the Not Wallflower series. And I think that's about what I got to say. I'm sure you have some questions.
I do.
Good.
And you were a photographer far before you came into ceramics, correct?
Yeah, I'm new to ceramics. So new meaning I'm self-taught. So about 8 years or so, maybe a hair more. The first major show I had was at MECA in 2017. Thank you guys. And I took a Saturday morning class. I thought it would be fun, just for change. No thought of using photography. And I saw what we've all seen, those mugs with a picture of Ruth Bader Ginsburg slapped on it. And it made me think, wow, you could put pictures on ceramics. And so I spent the next 3 years putting images on ceramics. And they weren't real successful, but I photographed every pot I ever made from day one on a white table. And I have a blog of every single pot. And I didn't keep any of them. So for 3 years, I'd make them, I'd smash them, throw them out, and keep going. But I had a picture record. And then when I felt things were getting stronger, I started saving them. And most of that stuff was the work that was in the MECA show. And that's sort of my process. I'll throw, they say for the Not Wallflowers thing, I made like 15 pieces, fully done. And at the end, I edit with a hammer. I just take the one I don't like and I give it a hit and throw it in the trash and then keep the finals. But everything is recorded. And to me, that's almost more important. If I'm working on a piece and I get to 3/4 of the way and think, it's not quite right, I'll still finish it because I learned from every piece. And that's the process I've had.
Okay. Well, I'm going to open it up to Q&A for some questions for Adam and Peter. And of course, if you guys have questions amongst each other, we're always happy to hear kind of that relationship. But I do have a question for Adam regarding that language that's happening. Of course, like we've seen it develop for millennials, but have you taken some time to actually kind of focus on what the language is coming with the newer generation with Gen Z?
I haven't. Well, I have. I'm observing it. However, because I'm not Gen Z, I feel like it's I haven't integrated myself in all of that lingo.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I also find that language to be um, within, maybe I just don't hang around Gen Z people, but it's within the digital realm. I haven't heard too much of that language in the real world.
Mhm.
But again, that just might be because I'm not surrounding myself with, I don't work at the college level at all,
Mhm.
or within academia or young. So I'm not surrounded by too many young people.
Mm.
Welcome to get to old as I am.
Wonderful. Well, we also have a question here from Alex for you, Peter. They are asking, do you ask permission to use people's images?
No, I get asked that a lot. When I did the portrait session, which I'm starting to do in the colder weather, because street photography in New York, you get everybody bundled up and it just doesn't work. So when I do the portraits, everybody signs a release. And I have a release that basically says the person in the picture owns all rights to those pictures. And I give myself only rights to the ceramics. So,
Mm.
because I was so used to doing releases professionally where I kept everything or the client kept everything and the subject got crap. So as a respect, everybody got copies of the pictures. Now I'm doing street photography, much like, Gary Winogrand, Robert Frank, Bill Owens, all these, classic photographers from the 60s and 70s, you don't ask permission. It's legal. It may not seem like the most friendly thing, but in Times Square, if you're walking through a camera, your interaction with a person is, milliseconds. So they may get annoyed that some guy's going through taking the picture, but they're already past you.
Yeah.
And if I want to really interact with somebody, I'll do the personal portraits. But street photography is a totally different thing. You can't expect privacy in Times Square. You can't go into a shop or a gallery or a museum and shoot a person legally without a permission. But streets, you can.
No, definitely. And it's one of those
Yeah.
things that we're on camera constantly, but don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. I mean, I've done it so long. It's not awkward for me. I know it seems it. I mean, it's more awkward for people walking by the camera, but that's part of what I'm after. I mean, I don't want people giving me their classic portrait face or, proving they have teeth, those portraits, so.
No, definitely. And I mean, there's that correlation, of course, that AI is generated by the fact that it's collected so much images of humans and situations that it just like kind of programs what it assumes you're asking it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think
go ahead.
there's I think blended reality is going to be a really big thing in the near future I mean, we already use filters on Instagram when we're taking selfies. So I do think there might be kind of a half of like AI versus real photography in the near future. And so again, not to scare anyone with that trough of disillusionment, but I do think the blending of reality and not reality is going to be bent even more.
Oh, definitely. No, especially with VR happening. Amazing. So I do have two questions coming up. Well, thank you, Patricia, for raising your hand. I will ask Amber's question first. And this is for Peter. Peter, do you print out your own decals? And if not, where are you getting them printed?
I do print them out. I use the fired on decals. I buy them in mass quantities. I do print them. I sit in front of a computer once the images come in, and I would go broke if I had to have somebody else print them. To get one anchor image the way I want it, I might go through 10 sheets, mainly because I'm working on the halftones. I'm making sure they go around the proper way. So yes, I do print them. There are laser printers. I also have a color printer that does just black and one that just blue. I found the black didn't work very well for me because I couldn't get a good halftone. And since my photography is my background, that was really important for me to have, not a high res image every time. The blue I found I could print at a lighter scale, and I could get some nice, which I used on the Not Wallflower series for the backgrounds. But I don't use that much anymore. And now I'm printing out actual, laser printer, the decals for the backgrounds and painting them. So all the images are sepia, all the color on them are painted with overglazes.
Oh, okay. Wonderful.
So,
And then,
so it's multiple flyers, and sometimes they're 9 flyers per piece.
that makes sense. And Adam, would you mind sharing how you kind of obtain your decals?
Yeah, my decals are outsourced. I use Milestone Decal, which is a local company to the East Coast. I'm not sure what's available on the West Coast. Um, but I've been looking into my own printers, but as Peter was saying, I'm hesitant for the quality and the type of tones that I can get. I'm not necessarily looking for, even though my work is blue and white, there's sometimes there's actually a little bit more green. There's variation in there, so I'm researching right now.
No, it's fun to hear how you guys source your decals. And Patricia, you have a question. Did you want to write it out, or you can just unmute yourself and then you can ask it in person?
There we are, unmuted. So it's really, some of it was just answered by the previous person, but for Peter Olson, who first I'll say, I'm an enormous fan. I think you are an incredible artist with a vision of making this great confluence of photography and technology and laser printing and ceramics is just fantastic. So I'm one of your big fans. I'm a potter. I work with fired on images as well, and have been doing it for probably maybe 10 years now. So my question is more around process. Your pieces are so intricate. One is sort of how long does it take you in the span making an individual piece? And also how many firings do you end up doing with the layers of the laser images and then colors and a base glaze and things like that?
It's pretty easy. It's the bisque, glaze, decals. So it's 3 flyers right there. And then if you're just using decals, you're done. But then I go on and I use overglazes, and I start with my cool colors, mostly the blues, and I put them on. I fire that at a much lower temperature, usually like a 0.16 to 0.18. So once I get that down, I may have to do that a couple times to build up the layers. I start working to the warmer colors because they take lower temperatures. So you have to think in those terms. For me, again, I'm old. So back in punk times, I was doing, pretty much large format portraits of, musicians and doing them all hand colored. So, I put that away to go on with life and make a living and do my thing. So for me, it was second nature to go back with a small brush and work these things. And it may take me 2 weeks to do one. And I may have 2 going at a time, but never more than that. So I pretty much concentrate on them. But for me to sit in front of, a piece and just work on it with, music and, visuals, it's totally enjoyable. Rather than to me, just throwing a piece and having it done doesn't quite do it for me. So I'm more involved with the imagery this way. That makes sense.
Thank you, Patricia. I do have a question for both of you guys. Since Peter, I assume you have a large archive of images.
Yeah, I have a couple 100,000.
Yeah, I guess so. And then Adam, I'm curious to know whether you're also keeping an archive of images that are generated that you're just like, maybe I'll use these in the future, or are you just taking automatically off the bat what gets generated?
Yeah, I do manipulate the pictures quite a bit. So if I start with one prompt, it could go through 7 or 8 iterations before I'm satisfied with it. And that could be everything from background to, like I said, how many hands are on them, or on each body. The number of images I have, I actually really don't know. It's probably in the thousands. And it's been about a year that I've started. But every prompt automatically comes with 4 images. So you can just think, if I have 50, that you just multiply by 4. That's just base. And then how many I've evolved since then.
And with my images, when I work on a pot or a new series, I usually use the newest images first because I get really excited about them. And the secondary pictures, maybe the band at the bottom where I put all the faces or something, that's some of the older ones. So, or I'll take some from the last series. I might make a small border. You don't know what they are, but they're actually, could be a streetcar, could be anything. So that's how I use my images, and they're all dated. They're labeled when they were shot, where they were shot.
I love that. And what makes those images pop for you guys? Since you are looking at such large archives that you guys have, what do you look for in those images?
I look for if there's, I feel like because I went to school for design, it's always about communication and what the audience is going to be looking for. So what I think is, how would someone else respond to this? Is it evocative in some? Is there a nugget of interest to it? Obviously, there's composition, but really, I'm also looking for, because they're, for now, two people in intimate relationships that I'm making. I'm kind of asking myself, would other people, could they derive a story from this? Could they, imagine this as like an actual queer relationship?
I guess with me, I get excited by the new pictures going through the archive. I mean, the new pictures I've shot from a session. And I may want to do more headshots, more close-ups of people, in a certain, focus. Sometimes I'll take some of the out of focus pictures and I'll put them in the front, and then I'll have, the focus for other people in the back. So I'll play with that. And my pots are more, I work in a vacuum. So I have to be interested in them. So when I'm done, I want to be able to live with that pot. One of the problems I have with a lot of shows is I don't want to send anything out. I want to keep it myself, which is kind of dangerous for what we do, and it's not very economically viable. And my house is filling up, but I have to enjoy looking at it. You've got to be able to go over and pick the piece up and have enough on it for me to keep an interest, and that's part of it.
Yeah, my piece in Fahrenheit was actually the one piece that I said I would never give up. I
was surprised you went.
Yeah, I was like, do I really want to send this? Do I really, I thought it was too good, and I wanted to shelter it from the world.
Well, the next show I have, it's the first time since I started that I started a series, a Mark for Life, and I completed it. I boxed it up and I sent it to the gallery, the whole thing, and it killed me. I did do 2 extras for myself, but it's hard. It's hard partying with this stuff. But I know I know it's okay. If I can get rid of it easy, I'll just take a hammer to it.
That's interesting that you made extras. I see. I have maybe it's an ethical thing, and it's all of my work with the AI could be replicated several times, but I choose not to.
Oh, these aren't replicas. These are actually,
okay.
I finished the series, boxed it up, but then I decided, I got a couple more I want to make.
I see.
That were totally different, and I kept those.
Got it.
That's what I meant. With what I do, I couldn't do it twice. This one, once you're done with it in that time, you have no interest to go back because all the exploration has been there.
That makes sense. And then I have a question from Liz to Peter. Do you edit your pics into halftones or gray tones? By the way, Stucky, etc., high contrast.
I don't do high contrast. The nature of the fired on decals, you get a halftone. So you're playing in Photoshop to make sure your darks aren't too dark or your lights aren't too light, much like you would in the dark room. So yeah, it's pretty easy, the halftones. To me, it's all about the halftones. I know Roberto Lugo does really high contrast work with decals. That's really beautiful. And I admire them, but it's with my, I have more of a photography background than ceramic and painting. But
yeah, I would ask Peter, I'm, and I showed in this presentation, I'm very influenced by Howard Kotler. Is there a person that you see that you are in the footsteps of or continuing?
See, not being a ceramics major in college and not really knowing the history, I don't have a lot of people there. But lately, I've been totally immersed into like Rococo, French porcelains from the 18th century, which if you told me 5 years ago, I would tell you, I would like that. I would tell you were nuts. So, with the new ones, it's sort of the, putting sort of the modern images into where you would normally have, the woman on the swing in the garden, now I've got like, somebody from Times Square with, doing something odd. So that's about it. I have a lot of influences that are photographers, but not a ton that are ceramics. I mean, I like a lot, but none that I'm saying, that I'm following.
And what's your take on self-portraiture?
Oh God, I once I did it as a joke. I went through and I must have like 10,000 pictures of me, my whole life. I mean, I've been taking pictures since I was in 4th grade. So, I don't do it now. I did one pot in my career. That was a self-portrait pot, and MECA owns it. And it's all just pictures of me. And I mean, I'm not like, George Clooney here. So it's like, I don't think anybody would be interested. I don't think it's like, just being honest. And I did one, but I prefer looking at to me and seeing what I see in the world and bringing it in. And you asked a question. So you're doing,
I have. Yeah, I have in the past. Previous work of mine really investigated selfie culture. And at the time, I was very uncomfortable in using other people's faces and bodies. So what I would do is I would go on Instagram and find poses that I liked, and then I would retranslate it through my own body. So I was using other people as inspiration, but felt that I needed to translate it myself. And again, I wasn't using decals. I was using a robotic arm to paint. So there was a translation there as well.
I mean, I did a series just before the pandemic called Cell Phones and Selfies. And I went to New York and just photographed everybody doing, and I did a series on that, which was a lot of fun. But, the problem I have with a lot of selfies and cell phones, and you'll see, like on LinkedIn especially, someone famous dies. And somebody will post a picture of them doing a selfie with that person. But that person is here and has no interest or not paying attention while the person doing the selfies out front. And it's always, to me, been really disrespectful for that second person when you do, the celebrity things. So, and, in New York, in Times Square, you got the people with the sticks, which I found amusing for a while, but not what you're doing.
Yeah, I was actually really interested at the time I called them anonymous selfies. It's where people would take a selfie in front of a mirror, but their phone would be right in front of their face. So they're taking a picture of this, but their face is completely obliterated. So I was fascinated with that.
Yeah, there was a photographer. There was a photographer a while back, Ray Mesger, Philadelphia photographer. And he did a series called Photo Interruptus, where he would have a landscape, but then there would be a brick in the middle of it, just close enough to obliterate this beautiful landscape or cityscape. So it reminds me a little bit of that.
Yeah. And if you ever do go through that internet search, Adam, about just people selling mirrors, it's just people holding their phone up to a mirror and taking a picture, but it looks almost like a selfie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a fun one. Great. Well, does anyone else have any more questions? Well, I want to thank you guys for joining us for this talk today, and all the insights that you gave, Adam and Peter. It's been lovely to hear that relationship, just how you guys have gone through similar topics, but just have broached it very differently, especially between the relationship of analog and then, of course, the idea of design and concept and doing it through like augmented intelligence. So it'd be really interesting to see you both just like keep going in your series and your work. So it's been nice to have you guys both in the same chat room.
I think it was a real nice pairing. Thank you.
No,
Yeah,
of
thank you
course.
so much.
Yes, but thank you to everyone who joined us, and I hope you all have a chance to come out to Fahrenheit 2024 and see it in person here at AMOCA in Pomona, California. And you can learn more about AMOCA and our current exhibitions on our website at amoca.org.